Good evening. Welcome to Building Bridges Food and Stations. There's healing at the table, y'all. We are at the end of our series. We've had some great conversations. I'd like to welcome my co-host, chefs Sarah Germany. Today's topics we're going to be talking about public safety, some gorgeous food, central ingredients to make our hood a neighborhood. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Germany.
Hey
Is she
folks,
there?
thank you all for being here. Hopefully you all have your plastic boxes. Sorry about the plastic, it was a donation. um, so you all are eating focaccia today, and the goal behind that was to incorporate as much of the roots that were growing at the farm this week as possible. So we had two kinds of pumpkin. So you're seeing, I'm gonna move over here for a second. So you're seeing pumpkin here, and this one. This is our pumpkin. We made this bread, and then that's topped with green tomatoes, a tomato and parsley salsa, and then roasted carrots. This one, we use the green skin pumpkin that was really yellow on the inside, and this is potato, leeks, cauliflower, and coconut milk. And then this one is this amazing, amazing purple yam. Can you see this? And we bake that with the pumpkin from this, eggplant, leeks, and fresh rosemary. So that's what I'm doing. And what I'm excited about is as we close up this first food and conversations, there's healing at the table. Again, thank you guys for being here and being a part of it. And I'm hoping that today you guys can set us up for next steps, right? One of the things that Zim said is that we really want to focus in our Building Bridges efforts is to really work on creating our neighborhood, like making our neighborhood a place that feels safe to be outside, to be able to go outside, to have more green spaces that people can hang in, particularly as we deal with this like COVID life and not knowing what's coming up in these upcoming months or even in the next year. Being able to have access to safe spaces and places to gather is crucial. So as we embark on today's conversation, I really want you all to think about recipes, right? I chose focaccia today because it is a five ingredient, very simple recipe to make, right? You need some water, some yeast, some salt, some sugar, and some oil. That's it. So when I think about building communities and creating places that feel safe, my question to you guys is what five ingredients would be key to create environments where everybody had space on the page and had an opportunity to be well and to practice wellness?
Okay, Diana, can you put the question in the chat box, please? I'll actually in order to create a viable recipe for public safety in bodies, one that can be taught, practiced, executed, and beneficial to most. What are five ingredients? Please limit them to five. I'm going to start with Brother Matthew.
Greetings, peace, y'all. Um, yeah, this is a great question. I love the analogy to a recipe. And I have been really marinating on this to keep it in the vein of cooking. I've been really like trying to think about it a lot. You know, five things. If it could only be five things, man, I don't even know. But what I do know is one thing that's really important for safety, for health, for security is just people got to get to know each other. And so I feel like we are living in a society that's so individualistic. It's so focused on the individual and the success of one over the success of many, and the spotlight on one over, you know, the collective. And then through COVID, through social media, through technology, we've become even more isolated, and we've become even more like wrapped up in our own world, our own ego. So that then creates this kind of like twisted view of the world. Like, I have a lot of fear for the young generation that's been trapped in computer land, going to school 8 hours a day, because we're trying to impose these systems that we were living pre-COVID, in a pandemic. And so we're trying to continue business as usual, even though we're living in a pandemic. So we know that our young folks are getting stuck inside, stuck in the technology world, or stuck and left behind, because we know a lot of young people are not engaging with school as it is now. They're not being found. They're kind of just lost. So what does that mean? And so it brings a lot of fear also, because I have children of my own who are kind of going through this, and I see how their education is impacting them. And so as a father, I've made a conscious effort to make sure that my children are getting experiences outside of the technology world, trying to learn using the natural world, get them outside. Let's go hiking, let's go dig in the soil, let's go build some things. And so um, I've been struggling a lot, because through COVID, right, we want to stay safe, we want to stay kind of separated, we want to not necessarily gather, but we don't want to lose those opportunities to learn from each other. And so the work that I do, we work on a farm on Castlemont High School, as well as some other schools in East Oakland, and we work with the young folks cultivating the land, teaching them about growing plants. But really it's all about just reconnecting to ourselves, to our roots, and to each other. And so the main thing I really see as being important is we need opportunities to engage with each other, to engage with the natural world, to learn from each other, to learn from the natural world, and therefore to be connected to each other and connect, right? Because we are all one. And so when we remember that we're all one, when we come from the earth as we're born, and when we die, go back to the earth, ashes to ashes, right? Dust to dust. We know that what I do to you, I do to myself, and what I do to the earth, I do to myself. And so we're living in this crazy time where we're in a pandemic. We're feeling the impacts of climate change in California. We got hot days in the middle of October, and we don't see rain in the forecast for who knows how long. We just hoping the rain's not going to come before, you know, we don't have to wait until December before it rains, right? So we know that we have to reconnect to each other. We have to reconnect to ourselves. We have to reconnect to the earth. So concrete answer, I don't really got one. I just know we need green spaces. We need opportunities to be outside, to be working together, and to be reconnecting. And hopefully through the conversation, maybe I could contribute more, have some things. I actually wrote some notes, but I don't want to, take too much space. I'll leave it at that, and hopefully we can see where it goes.
Thank you, Brother Matthew. I mean, we all don't got to, are we here, right? Okay, I got a little overzealous a little earlier and forgot to do the introductions. And so I would like to call on Maya Whitaker. Introduce yourself, tell us about the work you do, and answer the question.
So, hi everybody. My name is Maya Whitaker. I'm the program director for the Bay Area Urban Debate League. We actually just finished our first online tournament yesterday. We had about 60 kids compete online for debate from around the Bay. So, if y'all got kids and y'all want them to still be active, we are a program that is still going strong, grades 6 through 12. Everybody's welcome. It's free because it's online this year, and we're just trying to reach out to everybody. So, that is my day job. I teach kids how to be debaters. And in 2018, I ran for office in East Oakland. So if you see my face, you might remember me from there too. I love politics, and I'm happy to be a part of this panel again. Five things I consider as like a recipe for public safety. So I kind of kept it kind of short of like things that I would want to see. Of like, one, I know it has to be community led first. That's the first thing, is we come first to the table and come up with our own ideas that need to be put forth. I think the people most impacted by violence should be the ones leading the violence, solvency in Oakland when it comes to us, because they're the ones that know what's going on. We don't. We can make assumptions, we could provide resources, but if that's not what the people need, then that's just not what they need. So I think of one, it has to be community led. Two, community buy-in. So that's a larger group of making sure people are aware of what's going on so that they can make the choice to be engaged or not, because the more people we have, the stronger our coalition is to get past and stay. So I think of things like that. Three, I would think of resources. I say finances. We need money. It's good that we sit down and do these conversations, but everything takes money, and we need the unlimited resources behind the community ideas, and not have to like jump through the hurdles and bureaucracies to see who does what projects and what does what, because that really slows down the progress and the momentum in the community, especially because we live in like a microwavable society. So if things ain't quick, most people lose interest. So trying to be cautious of that, but also walking people through that, because in funding that, we have to stay vigilant on people's minds. For, I would say, the policymakers and stakeholders, to bring them in as like some of the last bits you will put on there, because anything that we come up with, we want to solidify in policy so it will stay. We don't want to just be giving these like 2-year programs, 1-year programs, things like that. The goal is for it to be in place for decades and for our children to be able to reap it. So policymakers would then have to be engaged, writing policies in our favor, crafted from our ideals and funded from our ideals. And then 5, because the work is exhausting, I said mental health services. Like, I really try to think about what else could I add to that. And I really think of myself, mental health services, because the work, like I said, is exhausting, from whether you fight from policing to housing to, just the everyday person, is quite exhausting mentally sometimes. And so having those services behind you to say, hey, we knew that could happen. Here's what we do when we get like this. Here's the space we take. Here's the practices we have. And hopefully that is also community led, because I know it is a lot of Black and brown people out there already doing the work that could help us, and not come in and say, oh, I don't understand. So yeah, that would be my recipe.
Thank you, Ma. I had a follow-up question for you. How do you talked a little bit about buy-in. How do you get community buy-in for your debating league with young people?
So for myself, I think our nonprofit is unique because not only am I a Black woman that leads it, also, but I'm an alumni to this program. So I'm from East Oakland. I went to Skyline. I got on the debate team at Skyline, and I took off with it. So I truly believe in the skills that I'm selling. And because I'm a community member, my friends trust me. Word of mouth is so important. We all talk to each other. So when people think of debate, they usually be like, Maya. So, it helps bring that community. Where one thing I noticed being a youth in Oakland, y'all are all talking to the same kids. You talking to the same group, and they know it. I don't know if y'all know it, but you talking to the same group. So why are we not tying in all of those resources so it doesn't feel like a pull for the same kids? We want to get everybody, and that works with just, community buy-in of showing up all the time. When I tell them I'm coming, I'm coming. Being available, being honest, even when it's hard truths. Like I had students tell me, I work at a group home too. Last night I had students tell me that they don't see themselves going to college. That's cool. I told them I have college debt from going to SF State across the water. You need to go get in a trade right now. Then you need to start looking up. If you want to do nails, then you need to be finding out what nail schools are open. You need to be somebody's intern right now and helping them paint their nails on quarantine. And like just being honest with them. Like, look, whatever your passion is, you just need to lean in it to the fullest and not wait. There's nothing to it. And that's that trust that you build with people, telling those hard truths, and more so giving them, again, those resources of, I'm not just telling you walk onto the pond and I've never seen it done. I'm also connecting you with other community members who also want to see you succeed and have your best interests. Like right now, like me and Z, that's how we met. And we've been rocking since. It's just about who you meet and staying connected.
Facts. Thank you, Maya. Brother Ra, give us an introduction of who you are, what you do, and answer the question that's in the chat.
Right on. What's up, everyone? This is Brother Ra. I work at our organization in Oakland called Lotus Bloom. I am the Director of Learning and Community Initiatives. We have a downtown location, an East Oakland location, and one that serves the San Antonio neighborhood. My recipe, I feel like Brother Matthew, this was sort of a challenge trying to get my ingredients all lined up. But in the realm that I work with, serving families and kids between 0 and 5, my top main ingredient is having affordable and high quality early childhood education. When we talk about safety, they say like even like the data shows that, you know, kids who go through Head Start programs and these other early childhood institutions, they are less susceptible to get caught up in the juvenile and the criminal justice system. For every $1 that we put into early childhood, we get $7.16 in societal savings. So we can bring that, especially to like Republicans who are always about like return on their investment. Like without having early childhood education and high quality and being affordable, we already know the outcomes. We already know that prison to or school to prison pipeline, and that's real. But by having these mechanisms in place, like early childhood, we can sort of deter that from happening. The other ingredient I have going on, similar to folks was talking about, is this high quality healthcare, and also one that includes mental health services and wellness. I'm really big. One of my other jobs that I work at is at the store called the Ravens Wing. We deal with crystals, herbs, sage, smudging, all this like spiritual inner work. And that's stuff that's indigenous to our practices that other people have sort of co-opted, rebranded, and sold it back to us. Oh, this is a smudge. It's like, nah, that's sage. We've been doing this in our, you know, culture for generations. Y'all just hip on it because it's, you know, the Aquarian age. But we want to remind ourselves that these healing practices, this inner work, this wellness, this is all from our peoples, and we just got to like tap back into it. So having emphasis on high quality healthcare and also that mental health well-being aspects to it. Community investment is big. I know when I was in Boston, there was a program called like the Red Shirts, and they would have inner city kids like work in the summer. And these programs not only like cleaned up the neighborhoods, but like the kids were, they had a sense of like ownership of their neighborhood. Like they didn't want to go ahead and throw that bag of Takis on there because they just finished all summer, you know, sweeping it up. So they're gonna get their homeboys and be like, hey, yo, like there's a trash can right down the way, we can put that in. But having job training both for youth and for adults, having maybe a center or location where we can do adult training, adult learning programs, community rec centers. I mean, in this day and age, a lot of those things were closed down or the funding was bad. It just looked like a room with some tables and some old board games. But we want to like reinvest into those community rec centers. And like Sister Maya was saying, we need access to financial capital. With all the loopholes and stuff, like we have ideas, we're innovative, we're creative folks, we're entrepreneurs. We just get the door shut when we try to go to the bank and bring our ideas forward. So we need like investment into our community and our business ideas and our entrepreneurs. And along with that, an employment is reinstating the voting rights for the formerly incarcerated folks. They served their time. They got let go. We need to bring them back into our community. We need to give them their given rights. Now that they did the time, you do the crime, or you do the time. They did the time. So why are we still holding them back from access to doing some of that civil acts of like voting and also with the job as well? Like my brother being a formerly incarcerated, he was telling me it's hard. Like you have the desire, you have the will, the skill sets to work, but they look and they run that report and they say, whoop, you know what? Hey, it looks like you served a little bit of time upstate Boston, like what's good? And then you don't get hired for that position. But we want to make sure our formerly incarcerated folks get put back in to our community as well. And the last thing I would say is reallocate these police budgets. When I look at some of these numbers, you have 30 to 50% of a city's budget going towards the police. I don't personally support defund the police, but I do think that we need to reallocate those funds and channel them into community services that can help support things like mental health issues. We call a clinician before we call the police. Getting in terms of like that kind of just taking away even like responsibilities the police don't want to be doing. We don't necessarily need a police officer trained for a gun with a gun and to attack somebody for somebody who's having a mental health episode. We need clinicians in there, someone who can talk them down, someone whose first thought is like, how can I, treat this person like a human being, not that, oh, my life is being threatened because this person is yelling and has a butter knife. So I need to shoot him 12 times in his leg, in his face, just to make sure I'm safe. I feel safe. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are my little main ingredients. Ooh, child. Let's get it done.
Thank you, Brother Ra. I had a follow-up question. One of the things you and Maya mentioned, which is so important, is the capital piece. Like, we're innovative. We have all of these great ideas, and we can put stuff together like a puzzle, right? I want to ask you, what support do we need to go into these banks and ask for without being denied?
See, I don't even know if it's the banks that we need. I mean, if we're really trying to be self-sufficient and having self-determination, we need to do some of those programs. I forgot the mobile banking that's just started up with rapper Killer Mike, the former mayor of Atlanta, Andrew Young, and there's a couple other like Black investors, but they created a platform for this particular reason because they knew that the banks, Wells Fargo and Bank of America, they weren't giving capital to us. So they created their own kind of entity that they can allow people to lend and get this capital that we're looking for. So we might just need to, again, reimagine what banking looks like in our community. There's still like those micro grants or micro loans that was really big in the places like India, and that gave a lot of the folks over there a heads up because there was these small investors loaning out micro loans below market rate, so that folks can actually thrive and start a business with. So I don't know if going to Wells Fargo and Bank of America is the answer. I think we again have to reimagine what banking and community investment looks like for us.
Thank you, Brother Ra. I appreciate it. Sister Shawana, in a while, can you give us an introduction of who you are, what you do, and answer the question in the chat box?
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So I am Shawana Booker. And I have a question because I guess I didn't sign in at the same time, but it's the question that was sent to us, right? The 5 questions. I don't see a question in the chat box, but I'm assuming we're answering that, the 5 things. So yeah, in the day I'm in a new role over with a program called Trauma Transform, doing work with the systems and yeah. So in the terms of the questions, some of my 5 ingredients, I mean, a lot of folks that spoke already brought some of the things up, but my number 1 is ownership of land and property. I think that will increase us in feeling safe if we have our own space. And we could keep ourselves safe in those spaces and create some sustainability in those spaces, including food security by gardens and stuff. Intentional partnerships is one that I think will add to us increasing safety. I think we have partnerships by happenstance, but being very intentional about our partnerships and continue partnerships. And then kind of the other ones feed into that a little bit, but strategy with receiving funds. I think that as a lot of nonprofits will apply for the same government funds. So if agencies and programs and businesses and nonprofits actually say, hey, we're in a certain block radius, this is our strategy for applying for these funds. So we're not all applying for the same thing, but we're actually building programs that complementing each other. And we don't all need to have the same pocket of money, but we can apply for different funding streams or apply in different ways and build on each other's strengths. And as well as investing too, for more private investment strategies for that. To really just build up the community and making sure we create opportunities for wealth and expansion and ownership. It's one thing, as a homeowner, I know the difference from when you can call a manager if your toilet is broken, when you know you're gonna have to go to Home Depot yourself and put a whole new toilet in if you break it. So ownership increases, some accountability and humility towards the land and to the space, and being able to invest in those kind of things will add to our that and value that is not always there. And then my last ingredient, some intentional learning structure. I think that if we think about what's necessary for our community, do we need more lawyers? Do we need more doctors? Do we need scientists? Do we need teachers? What do we need? And very intentionally reach out to our young folks and create cohorts that actually fill in the gaps of spaces where we fall short, so that the next generation, we have folks in our community that are our experts, that are our go-tos. Because if you think about morbidity, like for example, one is really popular of Black women dying at childbirth. Well, if we kind of groom and support our young Black men and women to become doctors, then we can help decrease some of that, ideally, right? And so some intentionality around what we're allowing I think Maya mentioned, picking a trade, but even having some intentionality in our partnerships. What's that like in 10 years? We're going to need this in the community. In 5 years, we're going to need this in the community. And that will add to our value and to our sense of safety, I feel, and our actual safety.
Thank you, Shawana.
I
had a follow-up question for you. I was talking to buddies the other day, and I was talking about
career. Talking to who?
I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and we were just career choices and why politics are the way that they are now, and how they want to be in the entertainment industry. So, like, how do we encourage our young people to get in these fields that aren't the most exciting? This going to compelled to go after being a lawyer or a senator?
I think some of it will have to be mentorship. I think the thing with in the music industry and being a celebrity is that's the example, right? So you don't know what you don't know, and a lot of times kids only follow the examples they see. So I have had this conversation with friends in my generation of, really the Black community in it is making it out. So you get off, then you go live in a white neighborhood or you go live somewhere else, but then the kids don't get to see what it's like for somebody to get up, go to work, and be that professional. So I think it'll have to be some intentional linking. Like I have a friend that's a medical doctor in Southern California, and before I call my doctor that I so happily pay with my healthcare, I call her. I'm like, why wouldn't I call her? I'm going to call her. So if somebody wanted to be a doctor, I would connect them with her. Like one of my goddaughters, she's going to massage school. And I have a young lady, a nice person that massages me. And I was like, hey, my goddaughter's going here. Can she spend some time with you? So when she finishes a trade, because like Maya said, she didn't want to go to school either. So when she finishes her trade, she also has somebody that's in the community, invested in the community already doing the work. And so we already talked about what that could look like. And it might be an investment on my part too, to help pay for some space just to get her started or whatever. But, it's very intentional. So I just think, to answer your question, my insight around that is there's just not enough examples seen. It's not that it's not happening. We just have to be intentional to make sure it's brought to the forefront and link kids to those other opportunities so they can see it.
Thank you so much, Shawana. I'm going to move on. Can you give us your name and what you do, and answer the question that's in the chat box, please?
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you guys again. I am Alicia. I'm a Oakland native, proud contributing community member. I'm also an entrepreneur. I'm the owner of Bijou Organics and Maud Apothecary, make natural wellness products and educate on natural wellness, ancestral medicine traditions, and things of that sort. And this question is, it's been pretty heavy on my mind, to be honest, through a majority of this this year in regards to public safety. And I have to say a lot of my mindset surrounding it has just been being more expansive about what public safety is, and kind of expanding it beyond just policing and thinking about public safety well before it gets to the point of where you're dealing with community policing. And so with that, of course, I think also during this time we're dealing with the social contract being renegotiated in a lot of ways. And so the first thing, the first recipe ingredient that I would add would be purpose, right? What is the purpose of public safety right now and as we move forward, and what will be needed by that? And so that requires us to kind of dig deep in regards to what our values are, what are our values for the community? Do they include things like the safety of the environment, so that kids are not growing up inside of environments that are actually polluted with, like these old buildings with maybe lead or asbestos or, who knows what inside of like the paint and inside the water and inside the air and all these different things, right? That could be leading to, developmental issues that might manifest as behavioral issues in the future, right? So I think that public safety should start well before, you know what I mean, people are acting out, or people enter crisis, or the police or any other enforcement mechanism kind of shows up inside of our lives. But public safety in terms of our environment, in terms of the equity in which we're sharing the resources that we all contribute to the Commonwealth, things like that. So considering the purpose of what public safety is going to mean in our lives right now and moving forward, I think is really important. Definitely community engagement. Meaning that the community should be involved, right? Again, if the social contract is changing, if the things that we have been contributing our resources to are being modified, or the deck is being reshuffled in some type of way, the community should be involved. The community's input should be valued. We should consider it, and we should make sure that everything is being equitably distributed, so that people are not contributing to the pot and not getting out what we're saying that that we're all looking for in regards to public safety. And I think that requires like some education and things like that. Again, on things like social contracts, right, and what public safety is actually going to mean for you in your life. Another thing I think is just like aggregating resources, like relevant resources, in regards to like how we're going to deliver the public safety, and growing up, my family's from the South, but they moved to Oakland, and in a lot of ways, I feel like a lot of the other people, like the elders and stuff around me, were also, a lot of them were also from the South too, or like had come from somewhere else, and so having those elders be a part of your life is also kind of a safety mechanism, or like having your community be engaged in some type of way and like looking out for younger people is a level of public safety. So I think that considering our resources in a way that don't necessarily have to do with money, so like being creative in regards to the resources that we have, and engaging other community members that people might not necessarily expect. You know what I mean? Like neighborhood watches are really powerful for a reason, because everyone's kind of engaged and they're tapped in and they're paying attention and they're talking to each other, and and a lot of things like that, right? And that's something that we can all do for relatively free. But it's still nice to be able to have budgets and money and stuff like that, so that you can expand your message, you can get your message out, and things like that. But I feel like stuff like that is really, really valuable, and that just requires us to be kind of creative in regards to what we see as resources around us. But money is definitely good. I always welcome money. Also like natural resources, and this kind of went back to one of the purpose-driven things being like environmental safety when we talk about public safety. But I think Matthew mentioned some of this too, in regards to like working with the land, that having access to the land, taking care of the land, making sure that there is less like industrial waste and things like that that are disrupting the environment that we're all living in, so that can actually be safe, and we don't have to deal with the fallout of illnesses and diseases and stuff that come from that might end up affecting behavior at a later time. So open, accessible access to the natural environment, to the lands and everything. And as a medicine carrier, that's really important, because if you can't go around and be able to access and, you know, get your medicines and things like that from your own local environment. And it's problematic, right? Like, we can do better. And enforcement mechanisms, right? Like, who's going to enforce, you know, your public safety mechanisms? All these things are really, really important to us. Like the neighborhood watch, you might have, like, you know, elders, the Miss Bonita types, you know, who are always out there, who are always seeing everything. But, you know, again, like, you know, if you have someone who's seeing things and kind of, you know, keeping a certain amount together, but, like, you know, who's going to enforce, you know, like, when things are kind of out of order, and how do we want that enforcement mechanism to look? Clearly, you know, people are not liking the flavor of police right now with the military, you know, that kind of militarization thing. So, you know, people are not feeling that, clearly. And if we are going to have, like, a partnership between the community and between law enforcement or public safety enforcement, whatever it is that we decide that is moving forward, you know, there needs to be an agreement. And we need to, you know, think about, like, you know, what does that look like? What does it look like to actually enforce the rules of a society or of a community? And I think that we could be creative in regards to what that looks like too. It doesn't necessarily have to be the draconian kinds of things that we've seen in the past, or you know, the way that the current public safety situation looks. So yeah, so that's what I think. Oh, also transparency. I would say transparency too. Like, I want to know what people are doing. So I think a lot of these kind of, like, community police commissions, or, you know, communities that are kind of, you know, looking with, like, a fine tooth comb and, like, a magnifying glass, and, like, looking at statistics and stuff, you know, who's being targeted, who's being arrested, who's being charged, you know, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, some type of transparency, you know, so that people can know what's going on, and you're not just assuming that people are doing their jobs and things are going, you know, the way that they should, or the way you expect them to go, but actual transparency, maybe like community reporting. And I think that also, if we utilize some of our resources, you know, our elders, probably some of our disabled people, and, like, really, really, as a community, aggregate ourselves together in such a way that we're valuing public safety, and that we're all kind of, you know, using ourselves as, like, an enforcement mechanism, and kind of checking each other in order to make sure that this remains a safe community for all of us.
Thank you, Alicia. I wanted to ask you one more follow-up question. Is what values are tied to this purpose for public safety? What are your values that's tied to this purpose?
God, my values are probably honesty, for sure. You know what I mean? I want to, when I think about transparency, I want to receive transparency and reports and feedback and things like that from people who are honest and who are committed to the community. You know what I mean? Like, they have some type of commitment to the upliftment and the actual safety of the community. So, you know, so definitely that. I think those are, like, the biggest things, you know what I mean? Like, some actual respect for the community, and a desire to want to see it thrive, you know what I mean? Not just survive, but to actually thrive and grow and be healthy. So, you know, so commitment is really important, and just, you know, respect and honesty.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Santoya. Give us an introduction of who you are, what you do, and in the chat box.
Hi everyone, I'm Santoy Latifa Trotter. I am a healer, I am a mom, I'm a psychotherapist, and I work in school-based health centers in East and West Oakland. So those are a few little roles that I play. And in terms of public safety for Black, Indigenous people of color, the first thing I thought about was love. And I know that's hard to quantify, but I think we need to speak it out more, and, you know, love for self, love for community, love for land, love for spirit, but just really love feels like a basic and foundational ingredient. And I hear a lot of love in this conversation, and really grateful to be here with all the folks who are here on this conversation. So my first ingredient was love, and it's one that's really important to me, and one that I try to cultivate and lead with in anything that I do. The next one was reparations, and so reparations from not just there's, you know, what people are speaking to in terms of the economic kind of economic justice point of view, but also because of the trauma that has been enacted against Black people in this country in 400 years of chattel slavery, that reparations, what I know as a psychotherapist is that, you know, one way of healing trauma is you got to acknowledge it, right? You got to validate it. And that's kind of a beginning of part of the healing process. And so I think for our country to federally kind of acknowledge the trauma that Black people have undergone in this country through reparations will both allow for a tiny bit of repair in terms of financial reparations, but also just acknowledgement. And I think that leads to safety, right? Like, kind of, if you heal the trauma, that leads to safety. And then the third ingredient I thought about was restorative justice. So instead of criminalizing people, you know, centering healing instead of incarceration. And so, you know, what we have here, you know, there's already a well-developed framework around restorative justice practices, and you know, you know, someone spoke earlier just around, you know, how do we like the abolitionist kind of point of view, right? And being able to just heal, like, how do we focus on healing rather than incarceration, and interrupt that pipeline and create more safety in our communities. If people are able to access more healing, then there's less harm, there's less violence, there's less crime, there's less substance abuse, if they're accessing healing. And I love that so many people spoke about mental health as one of their key ingredients. The fourth one I had was spirituality, and again, one that's hard to quantify, but I think spirituality, and not religion. Yes, religion and whatever, but spirituality in whatever way that shows up. And so spirituality also being, you know, connection to the land, right? Connection to the sky, to the stars, to the divine inside of us, to the divine inside of our community. But in whatever way that you know, connection to something bigger than yourself. You know, spirituality as our fourth ingredient, or the fourth ingredient I would invite. And then the last one was art and creativity, because I feel like every vibrant, safe community, you see art, you hear music, you see people are able to express themselves. And again, when I think about unsafety, right, like, you know, in violence or crime or exploitation, you know, I think the opposite of that is expression, and that art is a part of creating safe communities, and the ability, you know, and you know, the opposite of a repressed community is where we have artists and really value artists in our communities, and uplift them and have that be part of the dialogue, that we can kind of bring out solutions and bring out the kind of the things that are this kind of collective unconsciousness can come out through art and expression, or protest can come out through art, right? Love, joy can come out through art and expression, but having art, expression, creativity kind of as the fifth ingredient. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Centoya. Going to move on to Sarah Germany. What you got for us, sis? Sis, she there?
I'm here. I'm sorry. I got olive oil all over my hands, so touching the computer screen is a little challenging. So, mental health, economic resource, housing security, early childhood education. All right. What else? What's that fifth one? If we can, where do we start? Like, what's the starting point? In order to get a buy-in from a community on how to build a community, where do you start? Like, what do I offer my neighbors as an inroad to change how we live in this neighborhood?
I mean, I think one of the things that bringing us together right now is food. So having like a pop-up in the neighborhood, like a block party, shut it down, bring out food, everybody's welcome. You bring out bouncy houses, on the block, and then kids and families are going to show up. And then again, you start realizing that people care about you and your community. I mean, recently I haven't participated yet, but the Acoma Market out there started a couple of months ago, and that's a way to engage the community every week. So there's a Sunday farmers market. Not only are you providing employment for those community members and artists and people who do services like massage and food catering, you're giving them opportunities to sell, but then you're also giving access to those products to the community. So folks like Sister Alicia who do wellness products, if she was at that, oh, you know what? I can use some shea butter, or I can use this medicinal tea that was concocted by a community member so I can have better, immunity systems moving forward from now on. But one thing I loved about moving to Oakland and the Bay was all these festivals that we used to have that for me was defining community. You had like the Pan-African Festival, you had Life is Living, the Malcolm X Jazz Festival. All these were like staples in the community that folks that even when they got displaced would come back so they can participate in that community for all the healing, the love, the joy that was taking space in those environments. So I think more opportunities that we have to gather and engage folks and to give a wide range of opportunities. Like somebody might not know what orgonite is, but the fact that I make orgonite and I could talk about how it removes electromagnetic frequencies from your smart meter and your cell phone and the other devices you got going on. You see me at the market, I get to educate you and you're like, you know what? I had trouble sleeping. I had a headache. Maybe it is because I'm sensitive to these EMFs all around. Let me go buy one of these and see what happens. Most likely it's gonna have some kind of effect. And then you're gonna tell your other people's, hey, you know what? I know about orgonite. You know what I'm saying? Like you might be having a headache because you're getting too much electromagnetic frequencies. So I think, again, the more opportunities that we can engage with each other and with the community at large, like the better we all are. There's so much talent and wisdom in the spaces. We just need an opportunity really just to find out what each of us have to share.
Thank you, Brother Ra. I'm gonna move on to Maya Whitaker. I know you gotta go soon. In order to build trust to move forward, what's the initial starting point?
In order to build trust, what's the first step? Is that like
Yes, in order to build trust to move forward, what's the initial starting point?
I would say first thing is listening to the community. You can't, you can have all of these ideas and resources and you want to throw them all at them, but if those 10 ideas aren't what they're looking for, it's irrelevant. So I would think the first thing is coming in and listening to what are their concerns, what do they have, what do they have as issues, and then you figuring out, okay, how do I match what I have access to and the resources I'm bringing to what I can do, and if I know other people or things I can connect, really formulating that to build the community as to this is what they want to do and bringing in more members. I feel like that's the best way to do this is starting with conversation, opening up with them of we're just here to listen. Most people just here to tell you what's going on in their mind and what are the issues. You don't know if it's homelessness, you don't know if it's housing, you don't know if it's policing, you don't know if they just want the potholes sealed in their street. Like, so if you just is coming with all of this, you never know what you're marketing them. So make sure that, you're listening first. So then you can go in your backpack with your tools and give them what they're asking for, or better yet, make a phone call and connect them with the other person who has the hammer. So, just keeping it within our community and building that trust. And again, being honest, if you don't have that resource, being honest and saying, I don't know, we're both about to get on Google, and doing it with them and just being honest when you don't know something. So yeah.
Facts. Thank you, Maya. Gonna move on to Brother Matthew.
Yeah, give thanks. I really liked what Brother Ra was talking about in terms of just the space to engage, and connect together. I think that's what I was trying to say in the beginning is just these opportunities and these places to not only gather, but to share knowledge and to share wisdom and to share resources. I think the biggest thing is like, we need to become familiar, whatever it is we're trying to connect with. Like if we're trying to connect with a community of folks we don't know, we need to become familiar with them. And we practice this practice with the young folks we work with. We call it familiarization, because to become familiar is to become family. And so when we are family, then we kind of trust each other. We can take risks together. We can become vulnerable, and ultimately, then we can grow. And that's the goal, is to move forward together collectively. And so we sit in discomfort sometimes to become familiar, right? And so sometimes we do have to put ourselves out there, or open ourselves up to look at things that may be difficult to look at within ourselves and within our community. But I think ultimately we just need that space to really to get to know each other, to talk, and things happen organically. And I think that's one of the biggest things we're losing right now, is we don't get that organic opportunity to connect and engage. Also really like the notion of reimagining what is possible. As somebody who works in education, I'm incredibly disappointed that we have not reimagined what education is at this point in time. We're just trying to reproduce school at home on a computer. But there are folks out there who are reimagining what education is in terms of work-based learning, or interactive, hands-on, expeditionary learning, like all these things, right? But ultimately, I think that we need to have, for our young folks especially, we need to have relevant, authentic education. And we should be getting our young folks engaging with the community doing this work. I mean, ultimately, they're the ones who are going to be inheriting it, right? So like, why not engage them in the development work, in the reimagination work, in the recreation of the systems? Last panel, we had a brother on who was talking about developing new curriculums and new institutions and new things. And I feel like we need to go that route, reimagine these current structures. Let's create new financial institutions. Let's create cooperative housing. Let's create cooperative community land trusts that can't be developed, that can't be taken away, like things like this. So I love the opportunity to engage on this and to continue.
Thank you, Brother Matthew. I appreciate them bars. Let's move on to Sister Alicia. What you got for us?
Yeah, I was thinking that like the context in which you ask people questions, means a lot. So definitely like this kind of event where it's conversations and it's food theme, is a great environment and like context to be able to kind of like get people's bellies full, right? So no one's hangry ever. You know what I mean? You get comfortable, you're kind of like amongst fellow community members, or, and family. And so you really feel comfortable being able to like share and discuss what's on your mind. But, the environment and the context, of like whatever kind of situation, like definitely really matters. So I really like the idea of sitting down and breaking bread together. And then once you're in that space, being able to ask really good, engaging questions, really good, relevant questions. And so I think that that like asking better questions, you know what I mean? And like maybe even considering, who you're asking the questions of, like, what, right? Because you want good answers, you know what I mean? So you just want to like construct your questions better and more robustly, so that people can answer back, and it not be like yes, no, maybe, you know what I mean? But like, something that would actually lead them to engage with you a lot more and a lot deeper, you know what I mean? Once you're already inside of a situation, you know what I mean, where you're breaking bread with someone and you feel comfortable with them, discussing all these different topics, because it really gets it's pretty intense, you know what I mean? Some of these conversations can be pretty intense. So yeah, I would just say, ask better questions, ask, good questions, engaging questions, and always pay attention to the context, because that's, it's going to make a huge difference. And this is a perfect context, so.
Thank you, Alicia. I'm going to move on to Sister Centoya.
Thank you, Zimbabwe, for the question. I mean, I think what I would say, how do we get started is to recognize we already have started. And to recognize, not only here through this conversation, but also just in community, just there's so much that's already happening. There's so much community organizing. I mean, let's celebrate the victory of Black Organizing Project with Oakland Unified School District, right? And, having the police out of the school district, right? Like that was a 10-year, effort, and it has happened, and there's work happening right now to implement that, right? So there's organizing that's happening to support the health and wellness of communities, not only communities impacted by racism, white supremacy, poverty, all of that, but like all over, right, to make a world that works for everyone. And so I think recognizing the efforts that are already happening, coming together, lifting up those successes and those the work that's happening, and then joining, and like, as I think folks have said, how do we join our resources, right, like, and build that, I'm going to come back to love, right, and connection and care, build those relationships that are foundational so that we can keep building with one another. And as Shawan, like, not in our silos, not separated, not competing, but like coming together to build. So I think this is a beautiful like I have the image of like braid, how you braid bread sometimes, like this is a beautiful braiding together and bringing folks together. And let's like keep like opening our eyes, looking around, seeing what's happening, and then joining efforts with one another. So thank you.
Thank you, Santoy. Okay, we're going to move on to Shawana.
I don't really have much to add in addition to what everybody said so far. I mean, everybody spoke, so I liked everything Matthew said and Santoy and Alicia. So right now, nothing else I can add to that question.
Okay, thank you.
I'm coming back in here. Hold up. So, but here's the deal. I'm gonna push on that, Ms. Booker, because one of the things that we know for sure is that we have programs here in the East that could be dynamic, right? But without the right leadership or the right financial support, programming are struggling. So I love that, like, we all have the capacity to come together and build, but we know that because people are in competition for the same pool of resources, folks aren't always open to collaborating unless you can come in with an identified goal for them, not necessarily for the community, but for the organization. So when I think about moving forward with a platform that invites neighbors into a conversation with the sole goal of coming up with a viable community project, I already know that there'll be more resistance than unity. How do we combat the resistance with the collective agenda?
Okay, Shawana, you got that one? I know you got it.
I think that I don't know, feed all of that you have said. I think that in partnerships that I have or have built over time, it's about strategy and being strategic. So even if like you said, the for them is the agency in itself, ideally and hopefully that for them also serves and uplifting in the community. And some goals for a particular agency is to deliver a particular unit or a certain amount of services. Then if we can speak to how our partner allows in the strategy part of being very intentional about our partnerships, just the idea of community and collectiveness is not motivating, right? But when there is some intentionality around it, and there's some answers of how we all could win, I think that conversation could be had. But then I also know, I mean, we can say collective all we want, and being a leader in multiple systems and multiple programs, people don't want to ruffle feathers. People don't want to push back against people who are the funders. People don't even want to push back against their supervisors if they have a different view. You know, so positionality is sometimes even has a big impact. We as leaders might not always hear the voice of the people on the front line or in the community because the message doesn't always go up. And so, you know, it's important not to make assumptions like Maya was saying, but to create pathways for those conversations to happen and to be intentional about them, and recognizing those places where folks feel most vulnerable. Like, I don't got time to lose my job for the sake of the community to be speaking up against people that are gonna pay us. Balancing it, I think, in the honor of that, you know, everything has to have some balance. And how do we find that? You know, it's gonna be layers and levels to it. In the initial, we getting to know each other stage, we bonding, we formed, we got some cohesion, you know, just like any group dynamic, and figuring out where we are in that process and adjusting accordingly. But I don't know if that answers you. Sarah, Jeremy. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to Brother Rob.
Because I think about one of the most magical things last year that happened up in the Castlemont community was the April 2019 first Saturday, right? All the groups came together. We probably had like 600 people out in that amphitheater. It was great. But then by the time we got to the follow-up meeting to talk about how successful the programming was, 2 of the organizations pulled out, right? Which immediately took resources and made it impossible to create that particular event again with the same momentum and the same like dynamicy. So I think one of the things that, and somebody said it about when we have resources that only come in for a year or for a project, and that you can't kind of create sustainability and movement. And so I guess very similarly to like our political administration, right? When you have organizations that have leaders that have been sort of grandfathered in and who have been in those positions for decades and who aren't willing to sort of hear the community, what are some of the alternative ways of getting around those kind of age-old structures, particularly things that have to deal with county and like, or county or OUSD, kind of those entrenched rules that don't allow for a lot of flexibility?
I think that's where it goes back to something like I said earlier, which is ownership. So in working with you, Sarah, you know, some things come up like, who's going to pay for the food? Well, we own the land and we grow the food, and we do a portion of events like the big one we had in April. And we know we're going to feed 600 families, and we have some intentionality around growing that, around harvesting that, around how the kids and the community contributes to that, that we're not asking anybody for anything, as well as a space. Like when the county owns the building, they can regulate, but when we own the building, we get to decide how the events look a little bit different. So I think, and it goes back to, I think Matt was saying, if we don't, it doesn't need to necessarily be individual, it could be cooperative ownership and development and things like that. But if we act as a co-op in that way and then still utilize maybe public funds or government funds, we have a bigger voice because we have, you know, we have something valuable. You know, something I learned many years ago, someone told me when I was complaining about somebody I didn't like and the way they did things, he said, well, what's your competing structure? So you can't have, you complaining about something else, but you don't have a competing structure to go against it. So what's our competing structure that we have? And some intentionality has to go towards that if we're gonna push back, because then we obviously have something to say, like, I don't need yours, I have my own, or I can potentially, But anyway, that's my 2 cents on the dot.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to hear from Brother Ra.
Greetings again, y'all. I can just speak on my experience working with Lotus Bloom and some of the other partnerships that we've had in the past. Successes have been like the Oakland Family Resource Network that we are a part of. And these conversations came up where we're like, hey, we're all vying for the same local federal funding. Let's just come up with like a community strategy so that we can just get the whole bucket. And that way, when you're bringing it to different agencies who are potential funders, we're saying, this is the community that we're serving. These are the specific strategies each of these organizations are dealing in the community that's why we need $500,000. And then internally, we decide who's going to get more, because they're a larger agency compared to an agency that has 5 staff members. We'll find some kind of equitable approach to divvy up those funds. But I think there is potential there. It's like that old saying, like when the tide rises, like all the ships in the harbor go up. So you're gonna have some crabs in the barrel, and that's cool. They just fall aside, and you just build with the tools that you got. You know what I'm saying? So if the hammer's not working, then you find something else in your toolkit. So I think there's a lot of harm that's been done in these partnerships where one organization or group feels like they're taking the brunt of this co-op that we're supposed to be doing. So everyone comes together, but then on the planning and the actual execution, a lot of that weight falls on like 1 or 2 organizations, and then you sort of get left with this thing like, you know what? Like, that's not really a partnership. They just came with the idea, and I had to be the one to execute and then follow out and then do the funding and planning and staffing and everything else. So I don't know if I really want to be in a partnership. So some of it is too just like healing those wounds that we've inflicted on each other by not showing up properly in these potential partnership opportunities. But again, in my experience with Lotus Bloom, like there's a lot that we are doing in terms of like this collective, getting all these folks who are doing early childhood and servicing the same community members. It's like, let's build together. Where we're more likely to get an agency to send money if we're having this huge strategy, instead of just focusing on like the downtown neighborhood. It's like, no, actually our collective strategy deals with the whole East Bay and Richmond and Haywood and Castro Valley. So even though your grant is only for 50,000, again, we need like 150,000, because look at all these families we serve in, all these neighborhoods, all these things that we're providing. These resources are now accessible because of this group that we're doing. So I think there's still a lot of potential in there. And again, I can't speak for those who want to opt out. That's okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, when the revolution calls, like I might not pick up the phone. I might just, want to spend some quality time with my family during that time. So I want to give people that opportunity as well, but we can build together. I think there's enough of us out there that even if like folks fall to the wayside, there's enough who are down that we can have a strong thing to offer to the community.
Thank you, Brother Ra. I want to ask you, how do we even start that healing process? You were talking about healing with the co-ops. How do we start that?
I think a lot of just transparency when we're having these conversations or onboarding new partnerships, just to be real about expectations. Who's taking the lead on this? Who's doing financing on this end? Just to be really clear about like what these partnerships are for, the purpose, and who's taking leadership, and whether or not we're still have the capacity to do it. I mean, I know at Lotus Bloom, a lot of times people want to come and, can we pick your brain for some early childhood and play group experience? And you guys are leading this, and we would like to come. And when we were initial, we were just like, oh yeah, you know what I'm saying? We're grassroots, we want to support y'all. And then we had burnout. There was like no reciprocity in anything. We weren't actually benefiting as an organization doing these trainings. So it helped us shape like a new income-based strategy. It was like, well, if there's this need in the community, there's a demand for this learning, maybe we should try to find a way that we can package it up. And then going beyond that, it's like, we know maybe we can package it up in along with bananas or First Five. Maybe we can find something else. So it's just not like a little package, it's like a whole care package. Just like, Brother Matthew got the community boxes going, you know what I'm saying? You don't just get a head of lettuce. It's like you get the whole box. You get the cucumber, the radish, you get the sage, you get, you know what I'm saying, the tomatoes, the heirloom strawberries when they in season, you get the whole bundle. So that's, again, we want to make sure, like, I'm coming, the way I think of it is like that story, Stone Soup. And they came, because I was cooking with Chef Sarah yesterday, and I saw Brother Matthew at the garden. And it's about the stone soup. Everyone bring a little vegetable to the big community pot, and we all have something to feast on. So I might only have a carrot, and a carrot in itself isn't maybe so scrumptious. But, Sarah G, she got the veggie broth going. Santoy, she got, you know what I'm saying, like the heirloom tomatoes that are roasted and fireloom. And then Shawana got like the garlic, and then we all blended together, and now we eating good together. And we just gotta, just remember that healing process. It's like we want to do well together. If your organization goes down, that means like we at jeopardy too for losing funding and going down and not having support. So bring it on, yo, go eat that soup.
Gotta eat that soup, man, with the collective combinations of healthy foods, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna move on to Brother Matthew.
Right on. I always love Brother Rod's such a good storyteller. I love listening to you talk, man. And I'm in agreement. I know there's a lot of harm done by folks who are in the community who maybe say they're trying to do good, or they maybe even think that they're trying to do good. I mean, I've been in the OUSD for over 15 years working, and I've seen a whole lot of crazy things happen. And I'm so torn because, like, I know that the teachers union is really important and really strong, but I know it's also sheltering abusive teachers. And we have these teachers who should not be in the schools, who are cussing at our students, who are abusing them. Ultimately, they're violent, and they just get moved from school to school to school, and we don't think about that. And so I bring that up because it makes me think about my role as a community-based organization, mentor, whatever I am. I mean, I work for a nonprofit, right? And we're all about community education. I mean, our motto is creative education. Oh man, I'm blanking on the motto. Community cultivation through creative education. Community cultivation, right? So what does that mean to cultivate our community? As somebody who's been in a leadership position within the organization for a long time, what is my role? What is my duty to my community? I have a lot of young folks who came up in program who are now teachers working in program, right? And I think that's the model that we're really trying to develop is like, hey, we got our young folks who are participating. We're teaching them, developing their skills ultimately so that they can return and be in our community and do that for the next generation. At what point do I need to step? At what point do I need to work myself out of a job? And so I feel like that's the kind of dilemma that a lot of our community-based organizations are in is like, well, if we're doing community development work, but we're effective in it, we're going to essentially work ourselves out of a job. So then maybe I won't do such a good job, or maybe I'll just, kind of make it look like I'm doing a lot of effective things, but ultimate transformation is not happening, right? Because at the end of the day, like community transformation, community development, like the community will be able to hold its own. And so it makes me think about that. I'm just in a place too where I've been thinking a lot about personally, my role in the community and community work. But I do think that like these are bureaucratic barriers that are hella real, that organizations are not self-reflecting on. And I've seen it happen with community partners where they come in, they say, it's like Brother Ross talking about. They say, okay, let's collaborate, let's mash on this, let's do this project, but then they don't pull their weight, or they don't actually even show up, or they show up and it's disorganized, it's sloppy, and it's ultimately more harmful, you know? And so I think as a community, we also have to say, hey, you are harmful, and we are gonna say peace. Like, and that's what we need to do with these teachers who are just so harmful to our young folks.
Thank you, Brother Matthew. I love what you said about we got to work ourselves out of these jobs. That's the whole purpose of shift and change. I wanted to move on to bread, the Sarah G's making. Chef Sarah, can you tell us about the bread that you made today?
So you all have a umbe flatbread, and so in making it yesterday, what I didn't fully understand was the density of the potato. So it didn't rise. So it's just kind of dense and thick. So this is the retake. And so what I've learned just based on trial and error, when you're working with pumpkin and yam, just because they're nutrient dense and they're so heavier than just a regular white potato, like if you were gonna make like potato bread, you have to double the yeast. Otherwise your bread won't rise. And so this is just a retake of the umbre focaccia, just to make sure that we could get it right. I mean, I think they still taste delicious, but it's just a denser, it wasn't that light, fluffy. It wasn't a focaccia, it was a flatbread, period. But so as we close out this first inaugural Building Bridges Food and Conversation, there's Healing at the Table. We are hard at work submitting a grant that will go in today, actually, before midnight, if it hasn't already gone out. Okay. And the next conversation is called Neighbors Make Community. And the goal is to work with a group of young families, ideally young people under the age of 30 who are parenting, to pull in a core group of young people who are in that high school, junior, senior, or freshman college age area. So that's 16, 17 to 20. And then hopefully to pull in a couple of seniors into the conversation. So I may be reaching back out to you wonderful, wonderful folks for your expertise and your talents in terms of recruiting. And also maybe just in terms of facilitating, coming in and helping us facilitate a discussion, right? The goal really is to help East Oakland become well, right? And we want to do that one meal at a time. But we also understand that there are a lot of other components in this recipe to getting our hood to the status of a neighborhood, right? And that regardless to what happens on November 3rd, although we hope it's a Biden election, right? A lot of what happens in East Oakland won't change, right? And people know that. And so the hopelessness and the fear and whatever we're looking at in this winter, in this pandemic, I think it's really crucial to and to help people, folks eating as much fresh produce as possible and being in community and conversation about not only staying well, but how we can make our neighborhoods a better place to be. So again, you amazing, 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 amazing people. Thank you so much for answering my calls, sharing your hearts, sharing your talents. I appreciate y'all. I hope you all enjoy your focaccia, and I'll see y'all soon. Back to you, Z.
Thank you. Thank you, sis. We only got about good 8-7 minutes left. I want to ask everyone, how are you encouraging people to vote with your voice and with your platform? And I'm going to start with Sister Shawana real quick.
Can you, my reception is a little bad. Can you start with someone else? I'm fading.
Yep. Okay, I'm gonna start with Centoy. How are you helping people? How are you encouraging people to vote with your voice and platform?
I love this question because today my niece drove up from college. She lives in Georgia, drove up and voted with her grandparents, my parents, on a Sunday in Georgia to vote. And I was like, how you gonna vote? How you gonna vote? How you gonna vote? Like, you're all the way down in college. How you gonna vote? So like celebrating their vote today. I will fill out my ballot today and get it in. Just really, I used to be, long time when I did youth development work, did like the youth vote. So I definitely love the part in the ballot about like lowering the voting age and getting 17-year-olds voting. So just, and I told my son today, I was like, oh, I have a few moments. Why don't you come vote with me? He's like, I can't vote yet. And I was like, yeah, I know, but you can sit with me and fill out, while I fill out the ballot. And so just kind of training that voting age early. I think he's gone with me every time I voted in person. But also like supporting our young people, those 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24-year-olds to vote, and that it does matter, both federal and definitely local elections, and reminding folks about our ancestors and, what they went through in order to vote, and voting is not the only thing that we should be doing. Like, yes, no, don't just vote and that's it. Like, vote and organize and get involved and be active and create art and tell your story. Right, it's not just voting is not the only thing, but it is so important, and especially to this today, especially right now. But I think all the time it is so important to vote in all of the every election that we have. And I appreciate, sorry, one thing, like people, friends, community who like have all those voter guides and people who like deep dive in, because I'm not that person, but I got people in my life that are that person, so I can reference lots of different voting guides, which I'm grateful for.
Thank you so much. Alicia, what you got for us?
I'm trying to think of like the young people in my life and kind of how I engage with them, but I try to remind them that voting is an expression. You know what I mean? Like it comes down to whoever's on the ballot, but all politics is local. You know what I mean? Like the most important things that are going to affect your life, like most directly, are going to be local. And your vote is an expression of how you want resources and people and everything to be allocated in your community, and and in the broader society. But I think in reminding them that it is an expression of themselves, of their needs, of their desires, of how they want their tax dollars and the commonwealth to be distributed for their business, their benefit. It's a way for them to express their self-interest. So if only every 4 years, we're like, oh, vote. You know what I mean? But every other day in their life, you know what I mean? Not reminding them that, as you express yourself, during all these elections or whatever, your mayor matters, your school boards matter, the district attorneys matter, the judges, all these local initiatives and everything, right? Like the presidency isn't the only thing, you know what I mean? And you want to stay engaged in all of your local politics all the time, you know what I mean? So that people can be accountable to you and so that you can hold them accountable because you know what's going on. And again, like Sister Santoya was saying, I'm also not one of those people who's like super dialed in about every single initiative and knows all the organizations behind them and who's, who's funding money and everything. But I think that part of kind of having like, one of these mutual aid networks or, a community at large is that there's usually people around who are into those things and who can break a lot of those things down for you. And what I usually do, like with elders, with the younger people in my family is, just sit down with the ballot, pull up the internet, you know what I mean? Somebody will be on one website, someone else will be on one website. And then you can literally just like compare and contrast what, one side of this initiative is versus the other side or whatever. You can look up the actual nonprofit organizations that might be, funding it or may have brought it to the ballot. You know what I mean? So you're doing like active research and you're showing them kind of how to be engaged and how to express themselves. And so, so it's a whole big thing. Yeah.
Thank you, Alicia. We only got a couple left. I'm gonna bring it back to you, Sean. Sister Shawana, you there? Okay, I'm gonna bring it to
here.
Matthew.
Okay, yeah, Matthew's better. It's my internet is getting choppy.
I still want to hear from you. Let's go ahead and go. We only got 2 more minutes left.
Short answer is I forward my voter guides that from people I trust to other people so people can have a place of reference.
Okay, thank you. All right, Matthew, since we got left.
I'll try to keep it quick. So I don't really work with a lot of young folks who have the ability to vote. Either they're too young or we have a lot of folks who are undocumented. So there's a lot of stigma around that, but also frame it more like you actually can vote with your dollars, you know, like who you support, what companies you buy from, what products you buy. That's a big part of it. I love the idea from Santoy about even though you are too young or maybe you legally can't vote, let's still walk through this so you know the process, and let's make sure you understand politics, because I do think it's hella important that our young folks know what's happening in all forms of politics. So appreciate that.
Thank you, and that concludes our time. Thank you to our guests, to our viewers. See you next time at Building Bridges Food and Conversation. There's healing at the table, y'all, and it's a wrap. Have a good evening. God bless.